Hello guys, welcome to another video. And this one I'm going to be doing a bit of discussion on the second teaser that we've got for Path of Exile 2's upcoming update, the third Edict. And this teaser is titled Kulemak Teaser 2. So let's just quickly watch the teaser first so that we're all on the same page.
In the light, we burn. In the dark, we thrive.
Okay, so immediately from that teaser, any Path of Exile 1 player is going to recognize the color scheme and the words as Abyss. This is almost definitely going to be Abyss coming to PoE 2 in some form. We have the black and grey and green color scheme, and also the words thriving in the darkness and burning in the light. That is pretty much a good representation of what we know about the Lightless, or the abyssal creatures that exist in the depths of Rayclast. But how exactly does Kulemak fit into this? We don't really know much about what Kulemak is or who this is. We only have kind of small tidbits of information about that entity. And so in this video, I'm going to kind of try and piece together what I think is going on here. And to do that, we're going to have to begin with a bit of a concise lore recap of important things that have happened that kind of lead to where we are now. So let's start off with an event which is known as the Winter of the World, which is where volcanoes are erupting and the skies of Rayclast are filling with fire and ash, and it completely covers the continent, shrouding it in darkness. This creates a winter that's cold and dark and lasts for 1,000 years. At some point during that 1,000 years, likely earlier on, the Lightless come to the surface from underground, slaying the inhabitants of Rayclast. This is primarily in the Vastiri region, but possibly in other areas as well. The primeval civilization is largely buried under all of the ash, but a primeval woman known as Achilles survives and flees, and she would later ally with the Maraketh Akara, and that group is the forming of an order known as the Order of the Jinn. And the goal of their order is to seek out and secure powerful artifacts to seal them away from danger. Now, at some point after the Lightless coming to the surface and, slaying the inhabitants and causing chaos, the third pact is created, which is basically a uniting of a bunch of different races and groups that live in the Vastiri and beyond. This includes the Maraketh, the Sun Clan, which is the hyenas that we see in PoE 2, the Kabbalah clan, which is the serpents that we also see in PoE 2, the Titans, the Golems, and also even Chayula is part of this pact. So the Lightless are a very real threat that all of these different groups will come together and form an alliance, a temporary alliance, because they have a common enemy. And if they don't form the alliance, the idea there is that the Lightless will probably win and take over Rayclast. Then at some point further on, we have an event that happens where three sisters are able to essentially end the winter. The sisters are known as Soleri, Lundara, and a third unknown figure. They come together to unite the scattered Maraketh tribes, and they use the essence of gold and silver to clear the skies, ending the winter and driving the Lightless back underground. Now, a bunch of flavor text from Heist and elsewhere in the game would suggest that the three sisters are Solaris, Lunaris, and Viridi. Now, during this time, and for a long time after that, the Order of the Jinn have remained secret from the majority of civilization. They kind of operate in the shadows. They still have the same goal of, securing artifacts and keeping them safe, and keeping them from, getting into the wrong hands. However, one of the members of the Order is Janus Perandus, and at the command of Katarina, he sells out the Order, leading to the death of all members except for Jun and Janus. Katarina then obtains the Horns of Kulemak, having Janus steal them from the Order of the Jinn's Forbidden Vault. And with the Horns, Katarina is able to form the Immortal Syndicate, a new world order designed to be immune to the vulnerabilities of normal civilization, such as the death of leaders or other important personnel, due to the mysterious power of the Horns of Kulemak, which provide the ability to grant immortality, or to completely steal the life force of an entity. In fact, we know quite a bit about the Horns of Kulemak from different dialogue in the game. Jun in particular has a bunch of different dialogue about the Horns of Kulemak.
Katarina has obtained the Horns of Kulemak, an artifact capable of shifting the very energies of life freely. She sought power, not just magical, but political power. To be able to grant immortality is a powerful bargaining tool indeed. There is a reason my order hid the horns for so long, and we are seeing it play out before our very eyes. We believe the horns to be the ultimate tool of life and death, capable of siphoning the very breath of life from any living thing. We do not know where it came from. Perhaps the remains of a powerful long-dead animal. Perhaps a creation of the gods themselves. Regardless of its provenance, I believe the horns are what have given the Immortal Syndicate their miraculous ability to return from the dead unscathed.
And a further dialogue.
My people were long ago tasked with protecting the people of Rayclass from themselves. Many artifacts of great power exist, but there are some artifacts whose power is so great that to use them would put the world in jeopardy. Artifacts like the Horns of Kulemak. We, the Order of the Jinn, existed to keep such power sealed away in secret. Better that the world forget that it, and we exist, than fight for control of a power they have no hope of controlling.
Now, the only other mention of Kulemak that we have is the Cane of Kulemak, which Katarina is also using. And this one has the flavor text, "Stolen power is still power," referring to the stealing of the horns. Obviously, Janus actually stealing the horns from his order to then give it to Katarina, forming the basis of the Immortal Syndicate. Now, at this point, we kind of have to fill in the gaps. How exactly did the Order of the Jinn come into possession of the Horns of Kulemak? Well, I would theorize that this happened at some point during the Winter of the World, which would suggest that Kulemak has some relation to the Lightless or the Abyssals. Kulemak could be a Lightless Lich himself or herself, similar to the other Lightless Liches that we've encountered in PoE 1, but I think it's also possible and perhaps more likely that Kulemak is a different creature entirely, and the Lightless worship this creature. Perhaps Kulemak is the one that gave them their powers. Now, something that could support this theory is the Tier 17 Ziggurat map, where you face the Uber Katarina boss. Now, Katarina in that boss fight summons 3 of the notable Lightless Liches that we know of: Kurgle the Black-Blooded, Ulamon, Sovereign of the Well, and Amanarmu, Liege of the Lightless. It's interesting that Katarina actually summons these creatures. Perhaps Katarina, with the Horns of Kulemak, is able to command them to do whatever she wishes, and perhaps that would suggest that the Horns of Kulemak and Kulemak themselves is a creature that the Lightless worship and follow. Now, we also have some more kind of supporting material for this with the very first teaser that we got for this patch, which was an image with some different symbols that have been deciphered. Some of them have been deciphered, some not. And we have the word well here, and then further down here we have noble, highborn, and king all crossed out, and another word that would work there is sovereign. And one of the Lightless Abyssal Liches is, of course, Ulamon, the Sovereign of the Well, which fits with those two words right there. Then there's also winter, referring to the winter of the world when the Lightless first emerged on the surface. But then we have beginning and birth for 2 different symbols, and I think this is where Kulemak comes into play. We know that the Horns of Kulemak have the power to essentially give and take life, so that could explain the word birth. But there's a few interesting pieces of dialogue. First, from Zarka in Path of Exile 2's second act, when asked about the history of the Vastiri Plains. She says, "These fair plains became barren and lightless, a time those generations called the Winter of the World. 1,000 years of ice brought hardship and suffering, but that was only the beginning. To the south, the foreign tyrant Arn fell, and horrible creatures flooded forth under this darkness, seemingly born of bone and blood and foul magic." And then, perhaps more importantly, the flavor text on the sculpted, suffering, unique mace. The Abyssals were created, not born, and every moment in the light was agony. So, who created the Abyssals, otherwise known as the Lightless? Well, that could be Kulemak, which may support the idea that Kulemak is not a Lightless himself or herself, but perhaps instead some sort of godly entity or something with real power. And I think we're going to see Kulemak in 0.3 as part of the Abyss mechanic, being implemented into PoE 2. And we may even get to fight Kulemak, perhaps as the pinnacle boss for the Abyss League mechanic. But I want to draw attention to this flavor text once more. The Abyssals were created, not born, and every moment in the light was agony. This seems to suggest that the Lightless were created in the light, or were at least exposed to the light for some reason during their creation. But I'm not sure exactly what this could mean, other than reinforcing the idea that Kulemak isn't a Lightless, and may not be bound to light and dark in the same way. Perhaps the Lightless were a failed creation, or perhaps they needed to be exposed to the light in order to become one with the darkness. But regardless, I expect Abyss to make its way into PoE 2, though I'm not convinced we'll see the same winding Abyss chasing mechanic from PoE 1, because I'm not convinced that this will fit very well into PoE 2 with the backtracking and the lack of movement speed, but we'll have to wait and see. I'm excited for the full reveal, only 3 days to go for that. And if you didn't notice, unlike 0.2 where we didn't really have the full patch notes until a day or so before the patch, because, we had to wait for it to be data mined for the gem info and stuff like that, the 0.3 patch notes are going to be released immediately following the Q&A with Ziggy D, so we'll be able to go through the patch notes for all of the juicy info well before the release, which is great. And that's going to be it for this one. Thanks for watching this video, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.